Member of Parliament from Ukraine and Vice Chair of the General Committee on Economic Affairs, Science, Technology and Environment of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. I am addressing you today in my capacity as Special Coordinator and Leader of the OSCE short-term mission to the 2024 early presidential election in Azerbaijan. I would like, first of all, to warmly thank my colleagues present here, Paul Murphy, representing the OSCE and Vice President of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, Daniela Dorido, heading the OSCE delegation, for a great and constructive cooperation. Our international election observation mission was truly a joint effort, and I would like to underline the strong interest in observing this election and support of the international community to the people of Azerbaijan, as shown by the high number of international observers present. We witnessed a historic moment in Azerbaijan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This presidential election is the first held across the entire territory of the Republic of Azerbaijan since regaining of independence. Understandably, the topic of restoration of reality dominated the campaign discourse, overshadowing the discussion of important socio-economic and human rights issues. Our evaluation of the early presidential election in Azerbaijan is based on our observers' election day assessment combined together. This is very important, as well as on the monitoring conducted by the ODIHR experts and long-term observers present in the country since the beginning of the campaign period. We will announce the main conclusions of our joint election observation mission now. A more complete statement will be available to you shortly. So, the 7th February early presidential election took place in a restricted environment and while preparations were efficiently managed, it was not with the stifling of critical voices and alternatives. This was the first elections to be held to nationally recognized territory of the Republic of Azerbaijan. This topic dominated the lengthy campaign and effort the public sentiment. The incumbent was not meaningfully challenged, and this, combined with the shrinking space for independent media, civil society and political parties, and strengthened power of incumbency, resulted in a context devoid of genuine pluralism. Long-standing severe limitations on fundamental freedom of association, expression, and peaceful assembly, both in law and in practice, run contrary to standards for genuine democratic elections. The election administration conducted an extensive get-out-the-vote campaign, but the nominal campaign coverage by the media and clear absence of analytical reporting limited voters' opportunity to make an informed choice. While election commissions were well resourced, important safeguards were often disregarded and substantial procedural errors and omissions were observed during the opening, voting, counting, and tabulation. This is the overall picture. Also, I want to particularly highlight that Central Election Commission has regular sessions open to observers and the media, and I want to thank them for accreditation of our teams. I would like to thank once again the Azerbaijani authorities for their cooperation during this mission, and the people of Azerbaijan who were very welcoming to our observers on election day. Now, I would like to pass the floor to my colleagues and partners so they may also share their assessment and impressions with you. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to Daniela Dorido, who heads the delegation from the...
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you all for joining us after a long election day yesterday. I want to express with the election year in Azerbaijan. I want to highlight that our teams were warmly welcomed across the whole country in Baku, but throughout in the entire region, Afghan Peninsula, but also in the regions like Samarkand, Jabilabad, Riva, Gulistan, Chalyan, and Nakhchivan. Personally, I had the privilege of observing the process in Digər, including a polling station for informally displaced persons and Sovereignty region, and I have sent my sincere gratitude to everyone for their heartfelt and warm hospitality. Throughout our mission, we closely monitored every step of the election day process, from the opening of polling stations to the voting, countings, and tabulation. The polling stations we visited had a remarkable voter turnout, showing the strong desire of the people of Azerbaijan to make their voices heard in the election process and the country. In observing this election, I have noticed the strong absence of an engaged and informative public campaign between political alternatives, while the media environment remained extremely constrained, leaving voters without the possibility to meaningfully inform themselves about the options on the voting day. Women, especially, remain vastly underrepresented in political life. Also, they shoulder the majority of the organizational work on the election day. This demonstrates the need to introduce laws that guarantee equal perception in politics. As the preliminary results have been announced, we have also seen it officially confirmed that the incumbent enjoys a higher level of popularity within the country, not the least given his role in restoring the full sovereignty of the country, for which many people that we have met throughout these days have expressed their deep appreciation and loyalty. However, let me strongly emphasize that with a high level of trust placed in political leader comes also high level of expectations and responsibility for the forthcoming term. As the people hope to enter a new area of economic and social perspectives for the whole country and the region, addressing this recommendation will contribute to the future of democratic elections in the country and the future Azerbaijan overall in the forthcoming term. Thank you once more for your attention. I'm ready to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, we turn to Owen Murphy, who heads the ODR observation mission.
Well, thank you, Katia, and thank you all for coming today. You're all very welcome. My name is Owen Murphy, and I'm the head of the ODR Election Observation Mission. Our election observation mission has been in Azerbaijan for more than 30 days now. Our core team has been based here in Baku, with 100 observers deployed across the country since the beginning of January. And members of the core team have also made visits to different regions of the country as part of our work. I'd like to thank the people of Azerbaijan for their warm welcome and hospitality. And I'd also like to sincerely thank those members of our observation team who were recruited locally, who are citizens of Azerbaijan, and who played a crucial role in our mission across the country. To operate impartially, as commissions do not have a politically balanced composition. There was an extensive Get Out the Vote campaign, as well as a nationwide training program for precinct election commission members. And I observed this being disregarded and substantial procedural errors and omissions, and I will talk about this in more detail later. The long-term observation mission was informed by many interlocutors of arrests and detentions of critical journalists, civil society representatives, and members of non-parliamentary opposition parties in the period before the election campaign. This reinforced local and international concerns regarding a pattern of arrests and detentions, and this challenges the OSCE Copenhagen commitments for democratic elections. The President declared that the election was acquired as the restoration of territorial sovereignty marks the end of an era. Other candidates favored holding the presidential election early for this reason. This was the issue that dominated the campaign, as well as public sentiment more generally. However, the campaign itself was very visible. It generated little public engagement, and it lacked a competitive element. None of the 6 other candidates registered to take part in the election challenged the incumbent convincingly. Some did present platforms calling for political reform. Some unsuccessful nominees informed the observation mission that they were obstructed while attempting to complete the registration process. And some opposition political parties decided not to take part in the election at all, claiming, among other things, a lack of adequate conditions for a truly democratic process. All of this points to a lack of genuine political alternatives in the election. A nominal amount of money was spent on the individual election campaigns relative to the expenditure limits for the contest, according to midterm published reports from domestic observer organizations to prepare and deploy an observation mission. A number of our interlocutors raised their concerns that the space for independence is shrinking, and this along with the space for independent media and oppositional political activism. In conclusion, more than 330 short-term observers were deployed as part of one effort by the OSCE's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights and the OSCE's Parliamentary Assembly. I'd like to take this opportunity, if I may, to thank the head of the Parliamentary Assembly delegation, Daniela Beruda, for her support and for her leadership of her delegation. To improve the process for future in just a few months' time. My thanks to the interpreters for their assistance today, and my thanks to all of you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now there's time for your questions. In order to fit in as many questions as possible, I'd be grateful if you could keep your questions short and to the point. We have interpretation, and so you're welcome to put your question in either English or Azerbaijani. Please, the lady here.
Hər vaxtınız xeyir olsun. Pərvanə Bayramova, Amerikanın səsi, eyni zamanda Ton İnformasiya Agentliyindən. ATƏT dəfələrlə öz tövsiyələrini qeyd edir hər zaman. Yəni bunu tək beynəlxalq təşkilatlar, eyni zamanda Azərbaycanın yerli müdafiə təşkilatları, eyni zamanda yerli media hər dəfə bildirirlər ki, ATƏT-in verdiyi tövsiyələr Azərbaycan hökuməti tərəfindən əməl edilməyib. Sizin fikrinizi öyrənmək istəyərdik ki, həqiqətən də Azərbaycan hökuməti ATƏT-in tövsiyələrini indiyə qədər əməl edibmi, hansıları edib və yaxud da etməyib. İkinci sualım odur ki, sizin qısa müddət müşahidə missiyası konkret olaraq bu il Azərbaycanda növbədən prezident seçkilərini hansı növ yeni pozuntular aşkarlayıb və üçüncü sualım da, son sualım odur, Azərbaycanda media ilə bağlı. Bizdə mediaların məntəqəyə çıxışına icazələr verilmir. Sonra odur ki, bu media ilə bağlı ATƏT-in hər hansı bir tövsiyəsi var mı Azərbaycan hökumətinə? Çünki bəzi məlumatlar var ki, Azərbaycanın media reislə keçmə jurnalistləri məntəqələrə buraxılmıyor. Çox sağ olun, suallarım var. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your question. I hope I got all of the first part of that question. I just had a little bit of difficulty getting the translation. And so I'm very happy to take that first part of the question, and then we can look at the other questions that you had. And you were asking about the recommendations that ODIHR makes as an organization to Azerbaijan when it comes to the election process. I think the first important thing to say is that we were invited here by the authorities to observe this election. Azerbaijan is a member of the OSCE, and as part of that membership, it has commitments to the holding of elections and certain democratic international standards in the holding of those elections that it makes as a member of the OSCE. And so we're invited here by the host authorities to assess the elections, to see if they are in line with those democratic commitments and also in line with their own domestic legislation. And when we make that assessment, it then allows us to make recommendations that we hope will help improve those processes that we have observed. And again, it's not just about election day, although election day is very important. The reason we deploy in advance of the campaign itself is so that we can look at the entire process. And then having looked at that process, we then reflect and make recommendations. So what you will see in the report that we will issue at the end of this meeting is our assessment in each stage of that election process. So we talk about the environment before the campaign began. We will talk about party and candidate registration, voter registration, the administration of the election, and then into the campaign period, and then into election day. And then following on from that assessment, we will then make recommendations. So we know when we will point to in our report those areas where previous recommendations haven't been implemented, and in our final report we'll make recommendations for the future where we believe the process can be improved. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
I want to answer your question because he was invited to observe elections for Azerbaijan in 1995. So, we're invited for the next election, of course, for sure, rating which recommendations of OSCE visits from the previous observation were addressed, executed, were not addressed. And we mentioned that. We of course mentioned that. And in every report you can find, in our final report, for example, detailed profile of which recommendations were not executed.
Yeah, we have already made briefings with the journalists and be sure that all our colleagues are very aware under which circumstances this election took place. So it's a very important point that you raised. So journalists, and this is one of our references, have to be free and fair, and also that you have the opportunity to ask us questions here is one part of our process, and the quality assurance that we try to push forward during this election. But we also want to highlight that it is quite important that Azerbaijan keeps in the so-called family of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and be sure that we will try to improve the right of journalists inside of the OSCE room as a whole geopolitical region. I have worked myself as a journalist, and I try to move on with this, and this will be part of our recommendations as well.
Thank you very much. Any more? The gentleman here.
Natik Zabatlı Meydan TV. Canım Murphy'dir sualım. Təxminən 10 gün əvvəl Avropa Şurası Parlament Assambleyasının Almaniya deputatı Şvabı belə bir açıqlama verdi ki, ATƏT Azərbaycanda hökuməti təzyiqə altındadır. Doğrudanmı siz Azərbaycan hökumətinin təzyiqi altındasınız? Və ikinci, Cənab Şvabı deyir ki, ATƏT bizimlə, yəni Avropa Şurasına razılaşmadan bu seçkini müşahidə edir. Yəni biz bir yerdə razılaşmışdıq ki, hər ikimiz belediye seçkini müşahidə edirik. Yəni onları bırakmadılar. Xahiş edən bu suallarına cavab verirsiniz. Təşəkkür ederim sizə.
Well, thank you very much for that question. What I'd like to say is that we are OSCE, ODIHR, an organization that has its own mandate that is separate from other organizations. And we have worked before in close partnership with other organizations in many areas, including in elections, but we have a very specific mandate in relation to those participating states in the OSCE, and we've been invited here to fulfill that mandate. And what I can say is that in terms of how we go about fulfilling that mandate, we have a methodology that is well established and it is tried and tested with safeguards against any kind of influence that might try to be exerted on any of our observers. And this allows us to perform an independent and an impartial assessment of the election that we are invited here to observe. We have a very specific code of conduct when it comes to our work, and we deploy in teams of two, and all of these other things, safeguards that we have in place to make sure that when we deploy, when I'm leading an observer team from the ODIHR, that we are doing that independently, and that we're able to do that objectively and impartially. And that's how we do our work. And I want to be very clear about that. Thank you.
I will answer your questions very, very shortly and very, very openly. I spoke with all members of our delegation in peace and with many members of the short-term observers and LTOs. We're not under pressure because we have procedures, we have principles, we have rules, and we are following them strongly. Also, all team was very well trained under the Artur Gerasimov as special coordinator, Daniel Davider as the head of the delegation, and Owen Murphy as the head of the ODIHR mission. So that's answer for you. Thank you.
Maybe I can just add one point. I think it's quite important that we respect the authorities, and we need, wherever we go, we need an invitation from the authorities of the country we go to. No, we are not under pressure. We have other colleagues here, observers who have been in the polling stations as well. And imagine we weren't here to observe this, the election yesterday. Which impression would you have from the OSCE and its parliamentary assembly? So I think it's all times a good thing to accept the invitation, to be very open-minded during the observation itself, not only on the observation day, but also before it, during the briefings, but also to make a very frank and free report. And this is the job we have to do as parliamentarian and as OSCE PA.
The gentleman over here on the left.
Taktik Faradoğlu, Turan İnformasiya Agentliği. Mənim iki varmış, yəni kifayət qədər təbliğim var. İkinci sualım cənab Gerasimovadır. Cənab Gerasimov, siz tez qeyd edirsiniz ki, Azərbaycan 30 ildən sonra ilk dəfə suveren ərazisinin bütün güşələrində seçki keçir. Bu da yəqin ki, siz və mənim işğaldan əziyyət çəkən işğalın qurbanı olduğumuza görə yəni dərdimiz birdir. Sizcə, Azərbaycanın suveren ərazilərində, bütün suveren ərazisində seçki keçirməsi Ukrayna, o cümlədən qoyama daxil olan ölkələrdə Rusiya işğalına qarşı mübarizə riskini, mübarizə rəhmini gücləndirə bilərmi? Çox sağ olun.
I hope I took the point, but as far as I know, you didn't already get the report. But if you will read the report, you will see that we have observed all the specific points and topics of the election. And of course, we will write recommendations, not only while comparing it to the previous elections, but to the Copenhagen document, which is quite important for us to run quality assurance process. So I ask for a bit more patience, but we already mentioned, and Owen Murphy already did it, that there were gross violations of the process. Mostly what I saw was during the counting and the tabulation. But for more details, please read the report, the final report, which you will get afterwards.
As for question to me, I think I understand it right. I will try again to answer quite shortly and, straightforward. I congratulate the people of Azerbaijan with the liberation of the territories. In Ukraine, I praise and I say thank you for our army and for our people because we are fighting on our territory. But here, I am presenting not as an MP. I am the OSCE special coordinator. That's why I want to tell about liberated areas. First of all, I want to say thank you for CEC for their efforts for organizing voting for the internally displaced person. It was really important, and during the day of election, Daniel and me, we on purpose visited exactly the polling stations where the internally displaced person voted. Also, I have to say that I personally visited liberated areas before the elections, and we saw how preparations to the elections are held in these towns and cities. But also I can tell you that no one short-term observer from OSCE was not sent to the liberated areas during the election day. This is very important to understand that in these areas, because of the huge mining, you can't move without governmental support. But according to the rules and principles and procedures of OSCE observing, we can't observe elections being accompanied by government. It's against the rules. That's why we decided, because of this reason, not to send short-term observers to this area. But, as I told you, me personally, I was personally in the liberated areas. Long-term observers visited these areas from your team. Thank you for them. And they analyzed how preparations are done. Also, let me say that it didn't affect in any way the observation of election in our tasks, because more than 300 observers were deployed throughout the country in different regions, and that's why we had possibility to create this comprehensive report. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman here and then the lady in pink.
Добрый день. Агентство международной информации ТРЭН, Ильичина Лугов. У меня 3 вопроса к 3 господам и леди, адресованные разности. Первый мой вопрос к господину Артуру Герасимову. Вы сказали, что вы не подвергли какому-либо противостоянию или какому-либо давлению в Азербайджане. Это так, понимаю, на веру. Но не исключаете ли вы того, что некоторые члены вашего миссии могут быть подвергнуты не давлению, а влиянию со стороны парламентской ассамблеи Совета Европы, особенно при этом группы лиц, которые пытаются пристроить политическую инфраструктуру и механизмы внутри этой организации. Мой второй вопрос к госпоже Данииле Борисовне. Вы в любых выборах, независимо, как они проводятся, где они проводятся, кем они проводятся, есть явные аутсайдеры, явные лидеры. До голосования Азербайджана был известен лидер предвыборной гонки. Был известен народ, кого будете выбирать. Народ выбрал ясный выбор и выбрал своего кандидата. Но в нашем отчете нет ни слова о волеизъявлении, о том, что кого и почему выбрал народ. И не граждане, а народ. И мой третий вопрос, господин Эвернер. Вы сказали, что вы действовали профессионально, проводили странные, и ни один член вашей делегации не подвержен влиянию или какому-либо давлению извне. Но мы неоднократно наблюдаем, что давление есть. Причем давление со стороны не только международных организаций, но и государственных структур. Увы, мы должны констатировать. И то, что было лично о том, что был известен, это, конечно, домыслы. Я не подтверждаю этого. Было известно, что до выборов был первичный текст готов. А что вы скажете по этому? Спасибо за внимание.
Can I start to answer? Again, short and straightforward. Last night I was sleeping 2 hours. Do you know why? Because statement was written. Because we were writing the statement. Previously, 6 hours. Before that, 1.5 hours. Because I was visiting the territories. This is not true. Second point. Do you think that some can be under pressure? The answer is very, very simple. Some under pressure of faith, you told. I can answer very, very simple. First of all our observers under the strict code of conduct, and they're signing it. And I can tell you that majority of them is not first mission for them. And they are really very objective and constructive, believe me, because we had a lot of briefings, and today in the morning we had debriefings, and we saw different opinions. But what is really helping, and this is my final answer for your question, you talked about some observers, but all conclusions in the report, all, let's say, main findings are based not only on the somebody told, somebody did. They are based on the overall opinion when all the information from all the teams, from all the polling stations is collected, analyzed, and only after we are doing some things. And for example, some conclusions are excluded because, again, as you told, somebody told, somebody saw, but this is not widespread for different polling stations. So, no pressure. And we must to say that this mission is very constructive and really doing their job in the right way.
If I might just add to that as well, Archer said that he was up all night. Well, some of us have been up since December when we arrived. This mission has been here for a long time. It's the point where we have long-term observers in the field. And people would have seen our long-term observers and our core team since then, meeting with candidates, meeting with election commissions, meeting with different elements of the electoral process. And through that work, we're able to make direct observations ourselves. We don't consult with external partners when it comes to the work that we are doing, when it comes to the work that the three of us have done with our teams over the course of drafting this statement over the last few days, based on what we have observed ourselves directly and what occurred as well on Election Day. Thank you.
Let me briefly answer to your question as well. Yes, it is obvious. Most, in all the countries we are doing our observation missions, that the incumbent has the best chance to win the election because he's better known than his competitors. And here, this was especially the case. So I think we should highlight a special point as well, because we have seen here that we have had a low-key campaign, and so the other competitors had not enough chances to present their programs or to be known as alternatives to the president. But you have to know, I had a profession before I became MP. I was working as a sociologist. And due to my profession, we not only during our observation fill out some forms, but we are also speaking with the person who wants to do that and to are open for our interviews, I should say. So there's a remarkable point who was addressed by the incumbent, and this is the war and the end of the war. So in my view, and in our views, we debated it this morning and the day before. This is quite a crucial point for a high representative and a high turnout in this election, and people who support the president and the ruling party. But this nevertheless means that there are not expectations concerning the social and the economic future of your country.
Thank you very much. Ladian Pink.
Hoş gördük. Ben Mərdin qızı, Anews saytının baş redaktoru. Mənim 2 sualım olacaq. Birinci sualım, seçkidən öncə Azərbaycanda müstəqil fəaliyyət göstərən jurnalistlər həbs olundu və onlar bunu öz fəaliyyətlərinə əlaqələndirirlər ki, seçki qabağı buna görə həbs olunublar. Bilmək istəyirdim ki, sizin bununla bağlı hökumətə hər hansı bir tövsiyələriniz yer alacaqmı? İkinci sualım da müşahidəçiləriniz Qarabağda iştirak ediblər. Mənə maraqlıdır ki, həmin müşahidəçiləriniz Qarabağda baş verən dağıntıları, ətrafda gördükləriniz sizinlə bölüşüblərmi, təəssüratlarınız necədir? Və bununla bağlı da tövsiyələriniz hər hansı bir hesabatınıza yer alacaqmı? Təşəkkür edirəm.
And just to take the second part, or your second question, if I may, yes, over the course of our observation mission here, we did deploy long-term observers into the regained territories. And to be clear exactly on the work that they were doing there, they were there to observe preparations for election day. And what that meant was going to observe that precinct election commissions had been established. It meant going to meet the members of those precinct election commissions, checking things like in relation to the voter register and if it was publicly available. And there will be other preparations that go into election day. That was the purpose of the visit of our long-term observers to those territories, because as we do note in our report, 26 precinct election commissions were established in those territories for the purpose of this election. And that was the work that they were there to do. Thank you.
And I want to continue the same question. Yes, I pass on the words in these areas. And again, the purpose we here as observers for the election. So we paid our attention to the electoral commission, police stations, for the people, how they were trained, how they know what to do, how the police stations are organized. But at the same time, yes, for me was, I saw everything. And believe me, while traveling now in Ukraine, we saw the same. We saw the same. We see how everything is destroyed. And at the same time, I can tell you that on the way, I saw huge construction, which is now on the way. So that's what I can tell you about this.
Let me add the answer to your question concerning the journalist. As I already mentioned, I have worked as a journalist myself, and it's quite important that we underline this topic. But to do so, we have a podium with different journalists who are talking very openly about this situation. And once again, all the observers were very aware of these facts and the circumstances under which your work takes place. And this is one of the critical points we will mention in the report, because I think it's quite one of the most specific topics for a free and fair election, not only the campaign, but also the situation afterwards. But we have seen, as already mentioned, that there has been a high turnout, about 76.7% as far as I know, with a huge support for the incumbent, which is about 93%. That, in my view, as Vice President of the ACPA, means that the incumbent, the President, has to and can clearly afford to enable a much more free press, because he has so much support shown yesterday.
And also I want to add that we are aware about recently adopted law on media. We discussed it with the representatives of the media circles here, and our findings about that, our analysis about that, you will find in the final report, which will be distributed for you shortly. Thank you.
We have time for 2, maximum 3 more questions from the hall. The lady over there, and then the gentleman here, and then the lady there in the glasses, and then I think we'll need to move on.
Thank you. I represent Realty, and my question will be short. Your report contains an allegation of election irregularities involving one person who voted in several polls. I wonder, did your observers see it themselves, or you saw it on the social media? Because there is no investigation and it is not verified. So how can you involve it in your report if it's not verified? It can be all from previous elections, and we had this example before. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your question. What I can tell you is that we report on election day on what our short-term observers observe themselves, and the methodology is very clear on this. We have more than 230 short-term observers in polling stations across election day, And they did note a number of issues which are contained in our report, which you'll get very shortly, but I might just tell you about a few of them, if I may, in which I've got a chance to see the figures when we look at the report. We did see what we consider a serious violation. We saw evidence of ballot box stuffing, and we saw that on a high number of occasions, reported by observers. We also saw what looked like seemingly identical signatures on voter lists. We saw that in about 5% of observed polling stations that we were in. We saw instances of things like group voting, boxes not being sealed properly like they should be, and reports of the number of ballots in the ballot box being higher than the number of people who voted. We saw that in 12% of instances. We also had a difficulty in a small number of constituency executives where our own observers were not allowed in to observe, or if they were allowed in to observe, they couldn't actually see the process. And that, of course, impacts the transparency of the process. So when I talked earlier on about election day and about the irregularities that were observed and the concerns that we had, in the report we point to these very specific instances that we observed ourselves. And you'll also see other information there in terms of what was observed in relation to the opening of voting stations, the counting, voting, tabulation, and those issues as well. But there's just a couple of examples that we have ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman at the front.
Voice of the day. Voice of the day. Did this election win the trust of the international community?
Thank you very much for your question. And if I could just be very clear about what we do when we come here and why we do it in the way that we do. Azerbaijan is a member of the OSCE, and they have commitments to the member of the OSCE dividing observer teams in to observe on not just on election, but prior to the election. We do that according to a very specific methodology. We're here to observe. We're here to make assessments based on those observations, and then to inform the public of what we saw, the public here in Azerbaijan. And they can then use the information that we have provided to make their own judgment. And then following on from that, we then, in our next report, we make recommendations. And those recommendations are there to help improve the processes that we saw needed improving. So the report that we produce for the people of Azerbaijan in terms of the reforms that they may make in the future based on the commitments that the authorities here have already entered into. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A lady over here.
So, Shabnam, I will report news agency. My question is, some people argue that DTHİB mission is looking only for negative aspects in the election process in Azerbaijan and left out of the missions the positive aspects. How could you comment on this?
For the short-term of simple principle. What you see, exactly this you write in the form. Exactly this you report to your team. That's why everything what IDPs from Kelbajar were voting and election stations was not the truth that only we are trying to fight bad things. We are writing exactly the things we see.
If I could answer that, I mean, earlier in my comments, I talked about some of the training of polling station members that I did personally when I was over in Nachiman. And so we do note positives like that. We also note positives like the Get Out the Vote campaign that the Central Election Commission conducted. Yet nevertheless, when we go into a polling station on election day and we see that perhaps that training hasn't been effective in preventing from certain procedural irregularities, we have to point that out as well. That's what exactly Arthur was talking about when he was speaking to the short-term observers before election day, who are independent, who are impartial, who are objective, and we report on what we see, whether it is positive or negative. And in this election, we saw both. Thank you.
Let me also mention, please, in answer to your question, that every observer has to follow a code of conduct. And one of the most important topics in this code of conduct is that every observer has to be impartial. And this is quite important to see and to watch the whole process. But the report that we wrote is based on evidence, on the reports of the teams that we have, mostly in the case of the delegation, and I'm speaking as head of the delegation of the observers. This is quite important. But the other point I want to highlight as well is that we do that as a comprehensive approach. We have the opportunity as observers, as I was mentioned, to speak with people inside and outside of the polling station, not only during the briefings, but during the whole day of the election that took place yesterday. So I have been personally in a school yesterday where it was a meeting of the war you went through. And this makes clear how high and how deep the trauma has been that you went through. And this makes us more aware as colleagues, as MPs, what the situation in Azerbaijan means. And especially the women we were talking to were personally impressing me because they shouldered all the work, mostly all the work in the situation. And you can be very proud of the ladies living in Azerbaijan.
And I want to add shortly to your question. This is the report from 2020 elections. And in that particular report, regretfully, we wrote about that Azerbaijan didn't have possibility to organize elections on the occupied territories. And I'm really happy that the best thing happened, and now you can organize elections in all internationally recognized territory of Azerbaijan. It's written in the report, and as for me, it's a very and key positive thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to Zoom. We have two questions from France 24. Firstly, was this a special observation mission for you this year when some of your members could not enter the country and PACE was not invited? And secondly, your results and statements differ from other delegations and individual observers who have been praising the elections without criticism. How do you explain this, and whom should we believe?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I'll take the second one if I may. The OSCE's ODIHR has observed more than 400 elections since its establishment. We have very clear commitments for different countries as members of the OSCE. We also have a very clear methodology about how we do our work. It is tried and tested over a number of election observations. This is our 13th election observation mission in Azerbaijan. We don't compare elections between countries, we don't compare them within the country. We've had the opportunity, I hope this afternoon, to explain in quite some detail just how methodologically we go about our work in terms of when we deploy, what we're here to do, who we meet with. We don't speak for other observer organizations. We can only speak for ourselves. And again, reiterate the fact that we're invited here to do this work based on a very clear set of principles and a methodology that we have, that we use in every country that we deploy to, and we deploy election observation missions. Thank you.
Let me again to repeat about peace. Yes, the OCP, ODIHR, and PACE, I already talked about that, are different and independent institutions. As such, we have our own decision-making process regarding election observation activities as well. We always welcome in PACE when they are together with us. And at the moment now, because OSCE received an invitation, our leadership decided to deploy the mission, and we here, more than 300 observers, were observing these elections.
Thank you very much indeed. That's all we have time for today. The report and press release in both language versions are available on paper and also on the ODIHR website. Thank you very much indeed for your interest.